Hello everyone. Today I want to tell you again about the internet weather for the past week, and we start as always with the top 10 most probed ports. Now there's actually not that many changes. Yes, some ports have gone up and down, but mostly all of the ports that are being targeted and scanned are the same. So I picked one of these, 8545, to go into a little bit more detail and explain what's going on there. And I think just a preview for everyone to mark your calendars, the next time I'm here, I'm actually going to plan to talk about this other section, which seems to be overtaking the top 10. So let's see if we can look at maybe the top 20, and that might reveal something a little bit more interesting. Another thing that we usually discuss is the top 10 most sources probing. Yeah. So again, there's not a lot of change here. It's the same activity that we usually see, the same types of ports that we always see. Here it's interesting because the breakdown, if you look at the pie chart, that other category doesn't really seem to overtake in any way like it did with the most probed ports. So if we think about botnets, which is this is what this is trying to show, they're primarily against these ports, or the botnets are targeting these ports. Now I'm gonna show you a little bit more analysis I did on port 337.215, and that one I actually covered before, so this one is a revisit. So 8545 TCP, we've actually talked about it a few times on the show, and it's related to a vulnerability in Ethereum wallets.
The way this Ethereum works is anybody knows the crypto wallet address, they can typically own the wallet for the specific user. That might be the reason there's a specific interest in this specific port.
So I went and I just looked at the last year worth of scanning activity, and I kind of looked at the two charts side by side. So first is the scan probes, so the number of actual flow records that have to do with the attempt to find devices. And then the scan SIPs, which is the number of IP addresses actually trying to do this. And you could see the scales are totally different. Here you have like, I don't know, what is that, 250 million peak probes, but really, peak, 130, but mostly like, 30 to 40 IP addresses are doing this on a daily basis. So I said, let me investigate this a little bit more. Who's doing this? Is there anything interesting? So the view I like to use, and there's two views I like, the geographic view, and then I actually like to see who are the owners of the IP addresses. And when I did that, you could see it's pretty widespread. But the thing that connects all of these IP addresses together is that they're Tor exit nodes or similar hosting providers that provide kind of like bulletproof hosting services. If anybody's familiar with them, you'll see there's this dot that seems like it's in the middle of the ocean there. It's actually like an island where you can put some of your hosting infrastructure if you wanted to do something bad.
So basically it's in the international waters. It's
in international waters. Apparently, this is where adversaries like to operate from. So, what this tells me, a picture like this really just tells me, it's not a botnet or anything like that, but there is a concerted effort, probably by one or two adversaries, maybe a dozen, to go ahead and try to take advantage of this vulnerability. And unfortunately, just looking at some of the open source research, they've been successful at it. It's really interesting, and actually I like this because it ties the whole reason why we do the internet weather back to what is the purpose, right? So this is a good way to understand how some of the top probe ports relate to activities on the internet. And the other thing I wanted to revisit is port 37215, which is a vulnerability in a Huawei router. Well, actually, this is a slide that we talked about just, I think, last time I was on the show, sometime in August. So this is exactly the same slide. So this is what was happening in August. So I wanted to see, it's still on our top 10 list. What's changed? So this is what's changed. It's been a roller coaster ride. If you looked carefully at the map, you would have noticed that there was a little bit of changes in the hotspots on the map. Like, for example, in Russia, it seems to be a hotspot moved over a little bit more into like this, I guess, southwest part of Russia. which is interesting. So, but all the other victims are the same, like Tunisia, Ecuador, and there's the Korean Peninsula, China. This is stuff we've covered before. But it's interesting to me because actually that peak right there, where you start going downhill, that's when we were talking about this last time on ThreatTraq. Like that peak is when we discussed it. So since then, it's gone down. But in the last 15 days or so, it's gone back up.
So what's interesting is it seemed to go down after it was reported, and now that it's back up again, so to speak, I'm interested to see where it goes in a few days, a few weeks from now.
So that's it for the internet weather today. So these are the top stories I thought were interesting. Some of it is to revisit. I think the theme of our show today was something old becomes something new. We had Connie becomes Naki. We had DNS changer becomes Ghost DNS.
Yeah.
We had Satori type IoT botnet becomes Tori type botnets. And so this is another play on that.
There's always, with respect to the botnet, there's always dynamic nature of botnets coming in, members coming in, going off. That's the reason we see lots of shift in scanning. I believe that's what we are seeing in the internet weather too.